The soft chime of the restaurant door was something she heard hundreds of times a night. It was the kind of sound that told her another customer had come in, another smile had to be worn, another order to take, another plate to carry. For most people, it was just a job. But for her, every tray she lifted, every polite nod she gave, was part of a bigger struggle, a quiet battle to keep her life from falling apart. Her name was Emily Carter, a 26-year-old waitress at a luxury hotel restaurant in New York City. The restaurant was famous for its chandeliers that glimmered like falling stars, the kind of place where people came not just to eat, but to show how much they could afford. For Emily, who wore a plain uniform and tired shoes, it was like walking through a world that wasn't meant for her. Each day began before sunrise. She would wake up in a small apartment she shared with her younger brother Liam, who was only 14. The sound of his breathing reminded her why she worked so hard. Liam had been sick for most of his childhood, and the medical bills seemed to never stop coming. Their parents were gone, a car accident years ago, so Emily had stepped into both roles, mother and sister, caretaker and provider. Life had once been different. There was a time when Emily believed her hands were meant for something more than balancing plates. Her fingers had danced on piano keys when she was younger, back when she studied music at college. She had dreamed of composing her own songs, maybe even performing one day. But dreams, she had learned, didn't pay rent. When the hospital called one winter night asking for another round of payments for Liam's treatment, Emily sold her keyboard, dropped out of college, and took the first job she could find. She told herself it was temporary, just until things got better. But months turned into years, and the piano became something distant, like a memory she tried not to touch because it hurt too much. Still, every once in a while, when the restaurant was quiet and she passed by the corner where the grand piano stood, she felt a strange pull inside her. She would pause, pretending to adjust a vase or clean a table nearby just to glance at the instrument. Its polished surface reflected the golden lights above, and she could almost hear the sound of music in her mind. Then someone would call her name and the dream would vanish. That evening started like any other. The restaurant buzzed with laughter and conversation. Waiters hurried between tables carrying silver trays. The smell of roasted garlic and butter floated in the air. Emily had tied her hair neatly, pinned a name tag to her chest, and was doing her best to stay invisible, the way staff were expected to be in such places. But that night, something unusual was happening. The hotel was hosting a private dinner for a group of powerful investors and business leaders. Everyone whispered about one guest in particular, a man named Alexander Grant, a billionaire known for his sharp mind and colder attitude. People said he could make or break a company with a single sentence. He rarely smiled, and when he did, it was usually at someone else's mistake. Emily didn't care much about rich people. They all seemed the same to her, busy, proud, and never looking at the ones serving them. Still, she couldn't deny that nights like this made her nervous. Big guests meant stricter managers, heavier trays, and no room for error. By 7 o'clock, the main dining hall shimmered with light. The chandelier above cast golden circles on the marble floor. A small stage stood near the center with a black grand piano, waiting for the evening's musician. The hotel had arranged for a professional pianist to play during dinner. Soft classical pieces, just enough to make people talk about how elegant the night felt. Emily moved from table to table, refilling glasses, checking napkins, smiling even when her feet ached. At one point, she caught sight of Alexander Grant entering the room. He was taller than she expected, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly rent. His expression was calm, but carried the kind of power that made everyone straighten their backs. He walked like a man who was used to people stepping out of his way. The evening went smoothly, until the unexpected happened. Around 8, just as the guests began to settle into their main courses, the restaurant manager received a phone call. Emily noticed his face turn pale. He whispered something to one of the chefs, then glanced toward the empty piano on the stage. She heard bits and pieces of the conversation. The pianist had fallen sick and wouldn't be coming. The manager looked like someone whose world was falling apart. For a luxury event like this, silence was not an option. Music was part of the atmosphere the guests were paying for. Without it, the dinner would lose its charm. Emily could already sense trouble brewing. The manager hurried to Alexander Grant's table, trying to explain. The billionaire's expression didn't change much, but his voice, though calm, carried an edge that made even the waiters nearby hold their breath. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that a five-star hotel can't arrange one simple musician?" The manager stammered. "Sir, we are trying to find a replacement immediately. It's just very short notice." "I don't care about excuses," Grant interrupted. "I came here for an experience, not silence." The room grew tense. Guests glanced around awkwardly. The only sound was the clinking of forks and the soft hum of the air conditioner. Emily could feel her stomach twist. She didn't want to be anywhere near that conversation. But fate had other plans. The manager turned, scanning the room with desperate eyes, and his gaze stopped on Emily. She froze. "Emily," he called out. "Didn't you mention once that you used to play piano in college?" Her heart skipped. She opened her mouth, trying to deny it, but her words came out small. I used to, yes, but that was a long time ago." The manager's face lit up like a man seeing light after drowning in darkness. "Perfect. You can fill in for tonight. Just one or two songs until we fix this." Emily shook her head instantly. "Sir, I haven't practiced in years." "I can't." Before she could finish, Alexander Grant's voice cut through the room. "Let her play," he said. Everyone turned to look at her. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly as if curious to see whether she was brave enough to say no. Emily felt heat rush to her face. She wanted to disappear. The idea of playing in front of these people who wore diamonds and drank wine older than she was, felt impossible. But the manager was already nodding. "Go ahead, Emily," he whispered, "please. Just help us tonight." Her hands trembled. She glanced toward the piano. It looked beautiful and intimidating all at once. She hadn't touched one since selling her keyboard years ago. What if she couldn't remember how? What if she made a fool of herself? The billionaire spoke again, his tone flat but commanding. "We're waiting." A quiet laughter rippled among the guests. Someone murmured, "A waitress playing piano? This should be interesting." Emily swallowed hard. Her legs felt heavy as she walked toward the stage. Each step echoed louder than it should have. She could feel every pair of eyes on her, judging, waiting. She wanted to run, but something inside her told her not to. Maybe pride, maybe something deeper. When she reached the piano, she took a deep breath. Her reflection shimmered faintly on its glossy surface. She sat down, her knees almost touching the edge of the polished wood. Her fingers hovered above the keys, stiff at first. For a moment, she closed her eyes, and just like that, memories flooded back. The smell of her old music room, the sound of her first recital, her teacher's voice saying, "Play with your heart, not your hands." The room waited. Alexander Grant folded his arms. Emily pressed the first key. It was a shaky note, a little too soft, but it echoed clearly. She followed it with another, then another. Slowly, the melody began to form, uneven, uncertain, but alive. The noise of laughter faded. The room began to quiet down as people turned their heads toward the stage. Emily's nerves started to settle. Her fingers moved more confidently now, remembering patterns her mind had long forgotten. For the first time in years, she wasn't a waitress anymore. She was a pianist again. She didn't notice it, but Alexander Grant's gaze had softened slightly. He leaned forward, curious. For Emily, the music became a bridge between who she was and who she used to be. The pain, the exhaustion, the endless nights, all of it melted into the sound. The night that began like any other was about to change everything. Emily sat at the piano, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The soft golden light above her made the black and white keys gleam as if they were waiting to test her. Her hands trembled, and she could feel every beat of silence in the room pressing against her back. Everyone was watching. The rich guests in their sparkling clothes, the waiters frozen mid-step, and most of all, the billionaire whose single word had pushed her here. When she touched the first few keys, she could feel how stiff her fingers were. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was enough to fill the heavy silence. She began with a simple tune, one she used to play years ago when her music teacher told her to let the piano breathe. The melody was shaky at first, like a child trying to find its balance. Some people looked away unimpressed. She even heard someone whisper under their breath, "This is going to be painful." But Emily didn't stop. She kept playing, forcing her hands to remember what they once knew. After a few moments, something inside her shifted. The sound began to smooth out. Her fingers, though nervous, started to find their rhythm again. She let the notes flow, slower at first, then faster, like she was remembering who she used to be. The billionaire, Alexander Grant, leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. He sipped his wine slowly, eyes fixed on her. To him, it probably looked like a small performance, nothing more than entertainment while he waited for dessert. But for Emily, this was not a performance, and it was survival. She kept her gaze low, afraid to look at anyone. Her whole body was tense, but she didn't let herself stop. The music started to sound fuller, warmer. A few of the guests stopped talking. The restaurant that had been filled with chatter now grew quieter with each note she played. She didn't realize it, but her playing had started to pull people in. There was something raw and real in her touch, something that no professional pianist that night could have faked. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished, but it was alive. Still, not everyone in the room was kind. A man sitting near the front whispered something to the woman beside him, and both chuckled softly. The sound reached Emily's ears, but she didn't let it stop her. She had learned long ago that people could laugh at your pain. What mattered was whether you kept moving. Then halfway through the song, her mind went blank. She hit the wrong key. The mistake echoed through the hall like a loud crack. Her face turned red instantly. For a moment she froze, wishing the ground would open and swallow her whole. She could almost hear the billionaire's voice in her head, cold, disappointed, ready to mock her. But when she glanced up quickly, she saw something unexpected. Alexander Grant wasn't angry. He looked intrigued. His sharp gaze had softened just slightly, as if he was seeing something familiar in her struggle. Emily took a shaky breath and kept going. Her fingers stumbled once more, then steadied. The melody came back stronger this time, filled with something deeper, emotion. Every note began to carry her story. The nights she cried quietly while counting bills, the mornings she woke up before sunrise to make breakfast for her brother, the dreams she'd buried just to survive. And as strange as it seemed, the piano seemed to understand. The audience began to feel it too. Conversation stopped completely now. The laughter faded. The sound of glasses clinking and forks scraping plates disappeared. All that remained was her music, soft, broken, and beautiful. When the final note of her first song ended, a hush settled over the room. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then a light sound of clapping began from the corner of the hall, spreading like ripples across water. People started to applaud, politely at first, then louder with genuine warmth. Emily looked down quickly, her face burning with embarrassment. She hadn't expected applause. She stood up awkwardly, ready to step away from the piano, but then she heard Alexander's voice again. "Play another one." His tone was calm but firm, leaving no room for refusal. Her chest tightened. "Sir, I only remember a few pieces," she said softly. "Then play what you remember," he replied, setting his glass down. The manager gave her a nervous smile from across the room, silently begging her to continue. Emily hesitated. Her hands were trembling again, but something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to feel alive again. She sat back down and closed her eyes for a second. She thought of her brother, of all the nights she'd whispered to him that one day things would get better. Then she began to play. This time it wasn't a song from her old music classes. It was something she had made up years ago but never finished. A small melody she wrote in her college dorm when life still felt full of possibility. The moment her fingers touched the keys, something changed. The music that came out wasn't practiced or planned. It was pure feeling. It carried her pain, her love, her exhaustion, her small hopes that refused to die. The melody filled the hall like a soft wave. It wasn't loud, but it carried emotion so real that it seemed to wrap around every person there. People who had come just to network or show off their wealth now sat quietly, watching this young waitress transform in front of them. Even Alexander Grant, the man known for his cold heart, looked almost thoughtful. For years, people had said he cared only about numbers and profits. But as he watched Emily play, something stirred in him. A faint memory of when he was young, before success built walls around him. When Emily reached the middle of the song, she forgot where she was. She wasn't in a luxury restaurant anymore. She was back in her childhood home, sitting beside her little brother as he laughed at her clumsy mistakes. She could almost hear his voice saying, "You're the best piano player in the world." Her eyes began to sting, but she kept playing. She wanted to finish the piece. For him, for herself. The final notes came like a whisper, soft and slow, fading into silence. No one clapped this time. Not right away. There was a heavy pause, as if everyone was holding their breath. The music had left something behind, a kind of stillness that felt too sacred to break. Then, as if waking from a dream, people started clapping. Not just polite applause, real, heartfelt clapping that filled the room. Some even stood up. The billionaire didn't move, but his eyes stayed on her, and for the first time there was no judgment in them, only quiet respect. Emily stood slowly, her hands still shaking. She didn't know whether to smile or cry. She managed a small bow, whispering, "Thank you," before turning to step down. As she walked back toward the kitchen, her fellow waiters stared at her in awe. A few whispered things like, "That was incredible," and "I didn't know she could play like that." Emily didn't say anything. She just smiled faintly and slipped into the kitchen, where she finally let out a deep breath. Her hands were trembling uncontrollably now, not from fear, but from the rush of everything that had just happened. She leaned against the counter, trying to calm herself. Then she heard the door swing open. It was the restaurant manager. "Emily," he said softly. "Mr. Grant wants to speak with you." Her stomach dropped. "What? Why?" He didn't say, but he asked for you specifically. She hesitated. Her first thought was that she must have done something wrong. Maybe he was going to criticize her performance, or worse, complain to the management for letting a waitress play in his presence. Still, she couldn't refuse. She wiped her hands nervously on her apron and stepped back into the dining hall. Alexander Grant was standing near the piano now, talking to one of his assistants. When he saw her approach, he dismissed the man with a small gesture. Emily stopped a few steps away, unsure what to do. "Sir, you wanted to see me?" He studied her quietly for a few seconds before speaking. "You played with honesty," he said finally. "That's rare." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. "Thank you, sir." He gave a small nod. "Do you still play?" She hesitated. "Not really. I used to before life got in the way." He didn't smile, but there was a trace of understanding in his eyes. Life always gets in the way. Still, talent like that shouldn't go to waste. Before she could respond, one of the guests called his name from across the room. He looked over, then turned back to her and said quietly, "Keep playing, Miss Carter. You never know who's listening." And with that, he walked away. Emily stood there for a moment, too stunned to move. His words echoed in her mind long after he left. She didn't know what he meant exactly, but something inside her had changed that night. For the first time in years, she felt a spark, a tiny flame of hope she thought had gone out forever. She went home late that night, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her fingers still tingled with the memory of the keys. For the first time, she dared to think that maybe, just maybe, her story wasn't over yet. The next morning, Emily woke up before sunrise, like she always did. The city outside was still half asleep, the streetlights blinking in the pale blue light. She sat at the edge of her small bed, her thoughts spinning. Everything that had happened the night before replayed in her mind again and again. The moment she touched the piano, the way the room went silent, the applause, and the billionaire's voice telling her, "You never know who's listening." It all felt unreal, like something out of a dream. She had gone to work expecting another long, tiring night. Instead, she had ended up performing in front of the most powerful man she had ever seen. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at her hands. They still felt a little sore from playing after so many years. She ran her fingers over her palms and smiled softly. "I still remember," she whispered to herself. Then she heard her brother's voice from the next room. "You're up early again," he said sleepily, rubbing his eyes as he walked out. "Yeah," she replied with a small smile. "Couldn't really sleep." He noticed something in her face, a lightness he hadn't seen in a long time. "Something happen at work?" Emily laughed quietly. "You could say that." She didn't tell him everything, not yet. She didn't want to get his hopes up. "It was just different," she added, pouring him a glass of juice. He nodded, still half asleep. "Different good or different bad?" She thought about it for a moment, then said softly, "Maybe good." That one word stayed in her mind as she got ready for work later that day. Maybe good. It had been years since she had felt that way about anything. When she arrived at the restaurant that afternoon, things were strangely quiet. The staff who saw her gave her little smiles, whispers following behind her like a breeze. She could tell they were talking about last night. A few came up to her to say things like, "You were amazing," or, "I didn't know you could play like that." Emily just smiled shyly. Compliments were nice, but she didn't know what to do with them. She wasn't used to being noticed. Later, during a short break, the restaurant manager called her into his office. She knocked gently and stepped inside. "Emily," he said with a warm smile. "Close the door for a second." She obeyed, unsure of what to expect. He motioned for her to sit down. "I just wanted to tell you," he began. "Last night was something special. You saved the event." Her eyes widened. "Saved it?" He nodded. Mr. Grant was impressed. "And that doesn't happen often." Emily felt her heart skip. "He said something?" "He didn't say much," the manager admitted, "but he asked for your full name before leaving." "That's a good sign." She blinked in surprise. "My name? Why?" The manager chuckled. "Who knows? Maybe he wants to hire you for another event. Maybe he just liked your music. Whatever it is, I'd say keep your phone close for the next few days." Emily left the office in a daze. The idea that someone like Alexander Grant, a man who probably had everything, much would remember her name seemed impossible. But still, the thought filled her with quiet excitement. That excitement grew stronger when, 2 days later, she received a call. She was on her way to buy groceries after her shift when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it, thinking it might be a wrong number, but something made her answer. "Hello?" she said breathlessly. A smooth, calm voice spoke on the other end. "Is this Emily Carter?" "Yes, it is. This is Jonathan, Mr. Grant's personal assistant. He's asked to meet with you tomorrow if you're available." Emily froze in the middle of the sidewalk. "Meet with me? Why?" The man's voice remained polite. He didn't say much, only that it's regarding your performance the other night. "Would you be available at 3 p.m. at the Grant Foundation office on Madison Avenue?" She almost dropped her grocery bag. Yes, I can be there." "Perfect," he said. "Please bring some identification. The receptionist will be expecting you." When the call ended, Emily stood still for a long moment. People passed her on the street, but she barely noticed them. Her mind was spinning again. The billionaire wanted to meet her. That night she barely slept. She kept wondering what he wanted. Was he angry? Was he planning to offer her a job? Or maybe he just wanted to thank her in person. Every possibility ran through her mind until morning came. When she finally stood in front of the tall glass building the next day, she almost turned back. The place looked like something out of a movie. Shining floors, huge windows, people in suits moving quickly from one place to another. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted her kindly and told her to wait. After a few minutes, a man in a dark suit approached her. "Miss Carter?" he asked. "Yes. Please, follow me." He led her through a long hallway lined with paintings and quiet offices. At the end of the hall was a large door made of dark wood. The man knocked softly, then opened it. Inside, Alexander Grant was standing near a window looking out at the city. He turned when she entered. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," he said calmly. "Good afternoon, sir," she replied nervously. He gestured toward a chair. "Please sit." She did, trying not to fidget with her hands. For a moment, he said nothing. Then finally he spoke. "Do you know why I asked you here?" "No, sir," she admitted. He studied her quietly, then said, "I've attended hundreds of events like the one at the hotel. I've heard many pianists, some technically perfect, others painfully dull. But what you did that night, it was different. You played like you meant it." Emily's eyes widened slightly. "I just played what I remembered." "That's what made it work," he said simply. It was honest. There was a short pause before he continued. "Tell me, why did you stop playing?" Her voice softened. "My brother got sick. I had to leave college. Music didn't pay the bills." He nodded slowly, as if that answer didn't surprise him. "Life forces us to make choices," he said quietly. "But talent like yours shouldn't be buried." She looked down, unsure what to say. "I don't know if I'm still good enough," she said honestly. "You're not just good enough," he replied. "You're real. That's rare." His words hit her harder than she expected. For years, she had only heard people tell her to work harder, to be practical, to forget about dreams. But here was one of the richest men in the city telling her she was worth something. He stepped closer to his desk and picked up a folder. I'm sponsoring a new program for young musicians, people who've had to give up their dreams because of financial struggles. I want you to be part of it. Emily stared at him stunned. Me? Yes, you. I'll cover your lessons, instruments, even recordings if you wish to pursue it seriously. All I ask is that you take it seriously. Her throat felt tight. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. Tears filled her eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. Yes, she whispered. He nodded once. Good. My assistant will send you the details. We'll start next week. As she left his office, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. When she stepped outside into the bright afternoon light, she looked up at the sky and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. For the first time in a long time, her life wasn't just about surviving. It was about living again. That evening, when she got home, her brother was waiting for her on the couch. How did it go? He asked eagerly. Emily smiled, her eyes still shining. It went better than I ever imagined, he grinned. Does that mean you'll play again? She nodded. Yes, I think it's time. Later that night, she sat near the small window of their apartment, her fingers tracing invisible keys in the air. She could almost hear the melody she'd played at the restaurant, the one that had changed everything. The same hands that once carried trays and wiped tables were now getting ready to make music again. She didn't know where this new path would take her, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. Somehow, she knew that her story was only beginning, and that one unexpected night, one song, had been enough to wake up a dream she thought she had lost forever. The days that followed felt like a new beginning for Emily. For years she had lived the same dull routine, waking up early, rushing to work, coming home tired, and starting again the next day. But now things were different. There was a spark inside her, a quiet excitement that wouldn't let her sleep easily. Every morning she looked forward to practicing again. Alexander Grant's foundation had arranged for her to take lessons at a private studio in the city. When she first entered that bright room, filled with sunlight and the scent of polished wood, her heart almost stopped. The piano in the center looked like something out of her dreams, black, shiny, perfect. The instructor, a kind woman named Mrs. Lewis, welcomed her warmly. She had gray hair, soft eyes, and a way of speaking that made Emily feel safe. So you're the one Mr. Grant spoke about, she said with a gentle smile. Let's see what you remember. Emily sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. The first few notes were uncertain, but with each passing day her confidence grew. Hours melted away as she practiced, sometimes losing track of time completely. At home, her brother loved to listen to her stories about the lessons. You sound happy again, he said one night while doing his homework. I am, she admitted, smiling. It feels like I got a piece of myself back. Weeks turned into months. Emily improved faster than anyone expected. Her natural talent, combined with her emotional connection to music, made her stand out. People at the foundation began to notice. Some of them recorded short clips of her playing and shared them online. Slowly, without her realizing, her name started spreading. One afternoon, Mrs. Lewis received a call from Alexander Grant's office. After she hung up, she turned to Emily with a thoughtful expression. Mr. Grant wants you to perform at the annual charity gala, she said. Emily froze. Perform? In front of people? Mrs. Lewis nodded. Yes, it's a big event. Musicians, business leaders, the press. But he believes you're ready. Her heart started racing. I don't know if I can do that. I mean, I've only just started playing again. Mrs. Lewis placed a hand on her shoulder. Emily, sometimes opportunity doesn't knock twice. You've been given a gift. Don't be afraid to share it. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The thought of standing on stage again terrified her. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed like before? But deep down, another voice whispered, what if this is your moment? She thought about her brother, about the nights she promised him that better days would come. Maybe this was what those promises were leading to. The next few weeks were filled with preparation. Emily practiced every single day, sometimes until her hands ached. She chose to perform her original composition, the same song she had played at the restaurant months ago, the one that had changed her life. But this time she wanted to finish it properly. The melody had always been about loss and hope. Now she added new parts and the brighter notes, stronger chords, to reflect how far she had come. It was no longer just a sad song. It was her story of rising again, The day of the gala finally arrived. The event was being held in a grand hall filled with chandeliers and soft golden lights. People in elegant clothes filled the room, their laughter and chatter blending into a hum of excitement. Emily stood backstage, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. She wore a simple but elegant dress provided by the foundation. Her hands were cold and she kept rubbing them together to stop the shaking. Mrs. Lewis found her a few minutes before the performance. "Take a deep breath," she said gently. "Don't think about the crowd. Just tell your story through the music." Emily nodded, though her legs still felt weak. When the announcer finally called her name, the sound echoed through the hall. "Please welcome a rising talent sponsored by the Grant Foundation, Miss Emily Carter." As she walked onto the stage, the bright lights almost blinded her. She could see hundreds of faces staring up at her, including Alexander Grant sitting near the front. His expression was calm, but there was a small, encouraging nod when their eyes met. Emily sat down at the piano. Her fingers hovered above the keys. The microphone nearby picked up her breathing, soft, uneven, nervous. For a few seconds, the room waited in silence. Then, she began. The first note rang out clear and pure, like a drop of water falling into stillness. Slowly, the melody began to take shape. Her hands moved gently, carefully, as if touching something fragile. Each note carried a piece of her heart, the pain, the struggle, the long nights of doubt. The audience listened quietly. No one whispered, no one moved. The music seemed to hold the entire room in its hands. As the song grew, Emily began to lose her fear. She closed her eyes and let the emotion guide her. Her fingers danced effortlessly now, painting pictures with sound. The melody rose higher, filled with warmth and strength. It was no longer the music of a girl who had given up. It was the music of a woman who had found herself again. She played the new part she had added, a series of bright, hopeful notes that felt like sunrise breaking after a long storm. Even Alexander Grant, who was known for being expressionless, leaned forward slightly, his eyes following her every move. The song reached its final moments. Emily slowed down, her touch softer now, like a whisper. The last note lingered in the air, trembling before fading into silence. For a moment, no one spoke. The hall was completely still. Then one person began clapping, slow, deliberate. It was Alexander Grant. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet, clapping, cheering, some even shouting her name. Emily sat there, frozen in disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes. She had dreamed of this once, a long time ago, but she never thought it would actually happen. She stood and bowed, her vision blurry from tears. As she straightened, she saw Alexander rising from his seat. He clapped firmly, his usual cold expression softened by pride. After the performance, reporters rushed to take her picture. People came up to her with compliments and handshakes. She felt dizzy, overwhelmed, but deeply grateful. Later, when the crowd began to thin out, Alexander approached her quietly. "You did well," he said. "Thank you, sir," she replied, still trying to catch her breath. "You didn't just play music," he said. "You told a story. That's what people remember." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's my story," she said softly, "and now it belongs to everyone who heard it," he replied. That night, videos of her performance spread online. People from all over the world watched and shared it. Comments flooded in, messages of admiration, inspiration, and gratitude. Some said her music made them cry. Others said it gave them hope. When she returned home that night, her brother was waiting up for her, eyes glued to his phone. "You're all over the internet," he said, his voice full of excitement. "Everyone's talking about you." Emily laughed, unable to hold back her joy. She hugged him tightly. "We did it," she whispered. "We finally made it." She sat by the window again, the same spot where she had once practiced invisible piano keys. But this time she didn't feel small or uncertain. She looked out at the city lights and felt something new. Peace. She knew there would still be challenges ahead. Life wouldn't suddenly become perfect. But she also knew she could face anything now. The girl who once carried trays and hid her talent had finally found her voice. And as she drifted to sleep that night, she remembered the billionaire's words from that first night. "You never know who's listening." He had been right. Someone had been listening. Not just him, but the world. Her one song had changed everything. The morning after the performance, Emily woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages kept coming, from unknown numbers, from old friends, even from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Her social media was overflowing with comments, shares, and tags. Clips from her performance had gone viral overnight. Every platform was filled with the same video, her sitting at the piano playing with eyes closed and tears running down her face. The caption on most of them read, "Waitress stuns billionaire and entire crowd with one song." At first, she didn't know how to feel. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen as thousands of notifications kept coming in. It all felt unreal. Just months ago, she had been worrying about rent, saving coins in a jar, and now, the whole world knew her name. Her brother came rushing into the room, waving his phone. "Look, you're trending everywhere. People are calling you the piano miracle." Emily laughed softly, though her eyes filled with emotion. "That's crazy," she whispered. "I was just playing." "Yeah, but you played from your heart," he said proudly, and people felt it. The next few days passed in a blur. Reporters wanted interviews. Music schools sent her invitations. Talent agencies called with offers. She even received messages from people overseas, musicians who wanted to collaborate, students who said her story gave them courage to chase their own dreams. But amid all the attention, Emily stayed calm. She still helped her brother with schoolwork, still cooked dinner at home, and still practiced every morning. She didn't want to lose the part of her that had kept her grounded all along. One afternoon, she was invited to the Grant Foundation headquarters. The building was tall and glassy, shining under the afternoon sun. When she walked inside, the receptionist greeted her warmly, as if she were a celebrity. "Mr. Grant is expecting you," she said. Emily took the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened into a quiet office with a breathtaking view of the city. Alexander Grant was standing by the window, hands in his pockets. When he turned, he gave a rare smile. "You've caused quite a storm," he said. Emily smiled shyly. "I didn't mean to. I just played." "That's exactly why it worked," he said, walking closer. "People are tired of perfection. They want truth, and you gave them that." He motioned for her to sit, then placed a folder on the table. "I've been thinking," he said. "You have talent, but talent needs direction. I want to fund your first music album. Your songs, your story, everything. Full creative control will be yours. I'll handle the business side." Emily was speechless. "An album?" she repeated softly. He nodded. "Yes, you have a message the world needs to hear. Don't waste it," her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," he said with a small grin. And she did. Over the next few months, her life changed completely. She began recording her songs in a professional studio. Real microphones, sound engineers, and soft glowing lights instead of restaurant noise. The first time she put on the studio headphones, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you," before playing the first note. The same emotional depth that once filled that restaurant now echoed in every recording. Each song told a different chapter of her journey, from struggle to hope, from silence to self-belief. The album was titled "The Waitress Who Played the World Still." It was simple, poetic, and true. When it was released, it became an instant success. Her songs topped streaming charts and interviews poured in from radio shows, podcasts, and television. But the part that touched her most wasn't the fame. It was the messages from ordinary people. A mother wrote to her saying that her music helped her get through her daughter's illness. A teenager said Emily's story gave her the courage to try again after failing an audition. An old man wrote that her music reminded him of his late wife. Every message made her cry a little. She kept them all in a folder labeled "Why I Keep Going." Despite all the new attention, Emily never forgot where it all began. One evening, she visited the restaurant where she used to work. The same warm lights, the same soft chatter, the same smell of roasted coffee. The manager's eyes widened when he saw her. "You came back?" he asked, smiling. "Of course," she said. "This place gave me my start." She asked if she could play the piano for a few minutes. The staff quickly cleared a small space. Some of them gathered around, whispering excitedly. When she started playing, it felt like a full-circle moment. The notes filled the familiar air, but now with deeper emotion. Gratitude, peace, and love. Customers who recognized her stopped eating to listen. Some even clapped quietly when she finished. Afterward, she sat down with the staff, laughing and catching up like old times. No matter what happens, she said, this place will always be special to me. Later that night, as she walked home, she received a message from Alexander Grant. You were wonderful tonight, it read. She looked around, surprised, and then spotted his car parked quietly across the street. He gave a small wave before driving away. It made her smile. The man who once doubted her had become her biggest supporter. Months passed. Her album continued to touch hearts around the world. She performed in cities she had only ever seen in movies. She stood on big stages under bright lights, hearing thousands of people sing her songs back to her. But she never let fame change her. She always spoke humbly, always remembered the waitress who had once been afraid to play. In interviews, when journalists asked about her success, she always said the same thing. I didn't chase fame. I chased the music inside me. The rest just followed. One day, she was invited to perform at a music award ceremony. The hall was packed with famous artists and producers. When her name was announced as Breakthrough Artist of the Year, she couldn't believe it. She walked up to the stage, holding the award with shaking hands. She looked out at the audience and said, A year ago, I was serving tables, not sure where life was going. I thought my dreams were over. But that night, when I was asked to play one song, everything changed, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to remember who I was. So to anyone out there feeling small, don't stop. You never know when your moment will come. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, people cheered, and Emily smiled through tears. After the event, she went outside to get a breath of air. The city lights sparkled like stars. Alexander joined her quietly. You did it, he said softly. We did it, she replied, smiling at him. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He shook his head. No, Emily. You just needed someone to remind you what was already there. They stood there for a moment, both looking out at the skyline, silent but content. That night, Emily returned home late. Her brother was already asleep, his school books scattered across the table. She covered him with a blanket and sat by the window. The same window where she used to dream years ago. The city outside buzzed with life, but she felt peaceful. She took out her old music notebook, the one with scribbles and coffee stains, and wrote down a few new lines of melody. It was gentle, hopeful, like a promise for tomorrow. She smiled to herself. Her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The girl who had once been forced to play now played because she wanted to. Not for approval, not for applause, but for love, for the music that had always lived inside her, waiting to be heard. And as she softly hummed the new tune, a thought crossed her mind, and the same thought that had started it all. Sometimes it takes one song to change everything.